Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Tron Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we're going to be continuing What If Issei Was the Shield Hero, High School DxD, Dragon's Rage, Season 2, Part 2. But as always, before we get into today's video, I want to say thank you to everyone who supports Power Core Productions and Podcastings. As always, we cannot do it without you. You make the channel grow, you make the core grow. Now, I do have a few brief announcements I want to get out before we start today's video. First and foremost, as you know, we did remove What If Naruto Was Trained by the Avatar from the channel, simply because I felt as though the story wasn't really going in the direction that I wanted it to at the moment, and you guys really weren't feeling it, or at least a lot of you guys weren't, so I felt like it was for the best to just take the series off. And I figure at some later date and time we can come back with it. I think maybe I'll come back with it in the fall of this year once we wrap up a lot of the stories that we have coming out this year in the spring and summertime. But I do think I'll bring that series back, but I just want to stop it at the moment. Next and foremost, what's going to be taking its place? Since I usually have one video a day, Monday through Friday, and What If Naruto Was the Avatar was on Tuesdays, since that's being removed, we're going to keep Naruto on Tuesdays, but instead, we are going to be moving What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange from Friday to Tuesday. So that means What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange Part 5, you're going to be getting that video tomorrow. Since that video, you guys really do like that series at the moment, and I've got a lot of fun things planned with that. So we're going to be doing that series on Tuesday. Wednesday will still be the same. We'll still be doing What If Deku Was the Son of Rock Lee. We'll still be doing that on Wednesday, so that hasn't changed. And a lot of you guys really want me to continue Darling in the Franxx Lionhearted. That's the Darling in the Franxx crossover with the Voltron Legendary Defender series. So since enough of you guys want me to keep it going, and there's only like 2 videos left until the series is over, then we're just going to keep it going regarding that. So that'll still be on Thursdays, but on Fridays we're going to be bringing a new series, and this was the series that I announced last week, and that is going to be What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider. And we are going to be starting with Season 1, Part 1, High School DxD, Spirit of Vengeance, What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider. So I think that that's something that you guys will definitely be looking forward to on Fridays. And this is the first time I'm doing 2 High School DxD stories at once that will be completely different. I'm actually pretty grateful that we're going to be getting out of Season 2 of What If Issei Was the Shield Hero. That way we'll be getting into Season 3 of that pretty soon, and we'll be kicking off Season 1 of this. So that's how the schedule is going to be looking. Monday, we start with What If Issei Was a Shield Hero. Tuesday, What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange. Wednesday, What If Deku Was the Son of Rock Lee. Thursday, Darling in the Franxx Lionhearted, Darling in the Franxx crossover with Voltron Legendary Defender. And on Friday, we wrap up with What If Issei Was the Ghost Rider. But that's what we're going to be having coming out this week, so stay tuned for everything that is to come that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's story. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Issei and the others would make a plan on what to do, as far as their search was concerned, hoping that if they could find Freed, they would be able to get closer to where the holy swords were, potentially capturing or destroying them in the process. It was decided that both Zenobia and Irina would go and check out the east part of town, while the other 4 devils would check out the west. Once they had gotten their arrangements in order, before leaving, Issei would use one of his magical circles, the one that was connected to his portal shield. He would place a seal on each of the other members of the group, telling them that if they got lost or separated and needed help immediately, to call him. He could use his portal shield and get to them a lot faster. As thanks for their help, before leaving, Zenovia would give Issei a warning, telling him that the White One had awakened. This would give Issei a moment of pause and concern, remembering what he had heard from Kuroi in his dreams, that now the three dragons of legend were starting to awaken. Of course, Issei didn't know very much about the White Dragon or the Red One. In fact, there was very little that he knew about the cursed Black Dragon that dwelled inside of his sacred gear, the shield. All the same, that was simply another issue that he would have to worry about for another time. As they continued to make their way for the search, they would come across the same abandoned building where they had fought a stray devil not too long ago. Kiba believing that this was where they were being kept. And to no one's surprise, they would indeed come face to face with Freed once more. The ex-stray priest, now wielder of the Holy Sword, rapidly. He would use his speed in order to gain the upper hand, but Kiba was able to match him in power. Issei, serving as backup, would use his shield as a defense, while Kiba would only focus on the offensive side of the fight. In terms of knowing what shield worked best in this sort of degree, when it came to speed, outside of the promotion tonight, Kiba was best suited to match with Freed blade for blade. But in any of the blind spots, Issei would create an airstrike shield. The shields being created out of energy constructs and appearing in thin air themselves. Issei was able to create multiple of them, blocking Freed at the last moment. He would also counter with his own skills in wind magic, using his various torrents of wind to hold back against the priest. The others would get involved where they could, looking for openings and places where they could strike. For Saji, he was able to use one of his own sacred gears, the absorption line. Wrapping Freed by the leg, he was able to hold him in place, while Koneko, using her immense strength, was able to throw large projectiles at him. The priest, using his sword, would have no choice but to cut them down, but in doing so, it left him wide open to attack from both Kiba and Issei. Kiba, using his speed, would go in for a quick strike, using sword burst, creating multiple swords from out of the ground to attack Freed from every angle. Freed found himself being attacked on all fronts, and it seemed as though they were going to take him down. However, the voice of another man would come onto the scene. A voice that Kiba was all too familiar with. The voice was from none other than a man known as Valper Galilei, the one who was responsible for the Holy Sword project, the horrible experiments supposedly done in the name of God, the experiments that resulted in the death of all of Kiba's close friends and comrades, that set him on the path that he was on now. Valper would look disappointedly towards Freed, explaining to him that in order to get the best use of the Holy Sword's power, then one needed to pour its own power into it. It created a cycle, a loop of energy that would simply grow and magnify. Once Freed took the advice, he was then able to get the upper hand, and was able to push back against the devil forces. Although thankfully both Zenovia and Irina would arrive quickly, as Issei alerted them to what was happening, he used the portal shield and summoned them at once. The numbers were starting to rise, and pretty soon the odds would be stacked against them. With that, Valper would tell Freed that it was time for them to leave. Of course, Freed wanted to stay and chop up more of the devil's scum, but he had to listen to orders. And with that, the two of them would disappear into the night. Everyone was high on adrenaline, and they knew now that they needed to catch up to them as quickly as they could. Kiba went off running, with Zenobia and Irina not too far behind him. Once Issei had gotten his bearings about him, he was preparing to rush along immediately when he was stopped, as he, Koneko, and Saji would turn to see that the masters of their household had arrived, and they wanted an explanation for everything that was happening. Rias along with Akeno, and Sona along with Tsubaki. With no choice, Issei along with the others would have to explain what happened. Of course, they were upset that their servants had run off and done something so reckless, and they were adamantly punished for it. Both Saji and Issei especially, as they had to take 1,000 lashings across the ass, with an enhanced magic circle from their respective masters. Issei taking the brunt and most of punishment from Koneko, since he wouldn't have felt right for her to have to deal with that type of punishment as well. And besides, he was a big boy, he could handle it. At least that's what he thought after the first hit. By the time he got home, his ass was completely numb. But all the same, they were still worried about Kiba, and while they had to be punished, Rias still felt the same. It didn't matter to her that Kiba had left. As far as she was concerned, he was still a member of the House of Grimmery. She understood that his vengeance had gotten the better of him. She had known this about Kiba for a while, ever since the day that she had saved him. Deep down, under that friendly smile, was a boy who was always in pain, who always felt inadequate amongst his friends. Kiba wanted desperately to be with everyone else. Nothing would have made him happier. But this was the path that he had chosen for himself. He simply couldn't live knowing that he was the only one that survived, when everyone else was left behind to die. It was what he fought for, to get revenge on those who had wronged them, and doing so in the name of God no less. Rias would also be worried, but she hadn't gotten any news from anyone. No one was saying anything at the moment. Of course, Issei still had the portal seal on them. If they needed to, they could get to them as fast as possible. And Rias was about to take him up on that offer, when her familiar would return back with news. Irina had been found, out in the forest. She lay unconscious as she had been brutally attacked, and her holy sword Mimic had been stolen from her. Knowing that Issei had placed the seal on Irina, he was able to get them to teleport to her location quickly. With help from Asya and her twilight healing, they were able to reverse most of the damage that had been done, but she was still going to be unconscious for some time. All the while, they would be joined by the members of the House of Sea Tree, as Sona too wanted to investigate what was going on here. It wasn't a mere coincidence that the fallen angels had been attacking this town for a while. First there was the Rainier situation, and now this with Kokobile stealing the holy swords. But what was the purpose? What could they have been up to? From what they had been able to learn, the fallen angel activity that had been happening in the town wasn't happening because of its leader, a man known only as Azazel. But all the same, this was happening under his watch, and these such events were something that couldn't just be ignored. And they were right to feel that way, as Freed would appear behind them, introducing himself once more, as well as the man of whom he was working for this whole time. A leader class of the fallen angels. A man with long dark hair and with pale skin, with razor-sharp teeth, and dressed in a refined black suit. with 10 black wings, 5 on each side, flying high up in the air. This was none other than Kokobeel himself, who made his presence known to that of Rias Grimry and Sona Seatree, the two sisters of 2 of the 4 respective Devil Kings, Seraphal Leviathan and Serzex. Rias would ask him to explain himself as to why he was causing so much trouble for this town. And for Kokobeel, the answer was rather simple. Kokobeel longed for the days of war. He remembered during the last Great War when it felt as though conflict was constant. That was the time when he felt most alive. But after the last Great War, he felt as though the leadership of Azazel cost him victory, as Azazel himself made it very clear that on the side of the fallen angels, there would never be another war of that magnitude ever again. This was something that truly pissed him off. The conflict, the war, the fighting, it was absolutely what he lived for, and the idea of it being taken away, that was something he couldn't deal with. He had thought of many schemes and wanted to try everything to get a war started, but it seemed as though nothing was working. He had attempted to steal the holy swords, hoping that it would at least get Michael's attention, but heaven only sent a priest and a couple of exorcists to attack him. But he felt as though there were another way. He turned his attention towards the school, believing that that would be the ground zero of his attack. It would be simple, really. Destroy the sisters of the respective Devil Kings, and the kings would have no choice but to respond with war. And sooner or later, heaven itself would be brought into the fray, meaning that there would be no choice but for the conflict to resume itself. And when it did, then it would give him the all-out battle, the satisfaction that he truly desired and was looking for. However, everyone else around him, they thought that he was a madman. To actually suggest something like that, something that insane. Rias and the others knew fully well what such a war could entail. Even if they had not lived through it, they had heard many of accounts of what the last war had done to the worlds themselves. And in doing so, there was no reason to try to start another one. However, Kokobeel's mind was already made up, and he would leave them with a parting gift. Blasting the group away, Issei would create a large airstrike shield to block the group from the attack. Within the smoke itself, both he and Freed would disappear, making their way towards the school, where ground zero of their plan would begin. The others looked on a bit worried. Kokobeel was a fallen angel, but one that was way out of their league. He was on par with even God and the 4 former Devil Kings themselves. He was able to fight and hold his own against them all in their prime during the war. He was definitely not someone to take lightly. As they made their way back towards the school, they had to put a plan together as to what they were going to do. Rias planned to fight, as this was her domain. This town was under her watch, and she had to see to its safety. Akeno agreed, but she also took the liberty of calling Serzex. Rias at first was angered by this, for her queen to go behind her back and do such a thing. However, Akeno would make it very clear that these were not normal circumstances, and now was not the time to try to fight and hold on to one's own pride. The fact that they hadn't called Cerzex a lot sooner only meant that things could have been a lot worse. All the same, this was a situation that required his attention, and for the safety of everyone involved, they needed his help. Rias would relent and agree, but the time that Cerzex would arrive would be in 1 hour. As for Sona and the other members of the House of Sea-Tree, while everyone was on the school campus, a barrier would be formed around them. They believed the barrier was strong enough that they could maintain it at least until Cerzex and his men could arrive. It meant that they would have to hold out for 1 hour until then, unless they could somehow find a way to defeat Kokobeel earlier. Of course, everyone believed that they had the chance to win, but all the same, there was a tinge of nervousness as the air began to become silent and the sky faded into darkness. Everyone watched on at Kuo Academy as the school itself would become ground zero, and the countdown to destruction was now underway. In the meanwhile, Valper was also working on the finishing touches for his newest masterpiece, something over 20 years in the making: the fused Holy Sword, a combination of 4 of the most powerful of the former Excaliburs, with all of their power now combined into one. The next stage, the final evolution in the Holy Sword project, could now commence. As they made their way to the center of the school, Rias would make the strategy of using Issei as the ultimate defense. His ability to create shields and guard the others would prove to be a valuable asset. It could be the difference between life and death, buying them precious seconds, allowing them for the chance to counterstrike. Issei took his role seriously, knowing that if he didn't, this could be the end of everything that he knew and loved. His friends, his family, his dream of becoming the harem king, everything was at stake here. He couldn't afford to slip up. All the same, they would arrive to the center of the school field. Flying above on a self-made throne would be Kokobeel, as he looked on to watch at the entertainment. Valper was finishing up the ritual for the Holy Sword, and he needed just a little more time. He decided that now would be as good a time as any to have a little entertainment before the war begins. And he would summon for himself a creature from hell, one that would prove to be a bit of fun. He summoned the legendary monster, the 3-headed dog Cerberus. The others would look on at the bit of a daunting task of facing the 3-headed beast. Rias would remark that summoning Cerberus into the world of the mortals was strictly forbidden, and now he had already gone above and beyond in damning his soul. However, Kokobeel at this moment truly didn't care. All the same, he was already planning on starting a war. It didn't matter what rules he had to break to get there. The others would mainly turn their attention to defeating Cerberus and sending it back to where it came from. As they did so, Issei would use his shield as instructed to guard and block the others while they would counterstrike and attack. Issei would use the airstrike shield the best, as he could create multiple of them from any point in the area without needing to be there, and they were the good sort of range defense that they needed at the moment. While he would take the fighting with the Chimera Viper Shield, a shield that was capable of blasting out energy from the center jewel. a shield capable of both offense and defense. It was sort of his main way of attacking, through long range. Taking time to store up the energy, he would fire it at concentrated points at the three-headed beast, aiming for its eyes to try to blind it for a briefest of moments, or at the very least stunning it long enough for Rias and Akeno to deliver the finishing blows. While they did so, they were actually able to take off a piece of the beast itself, as a piece of its tooth would go falling to the ground. At that moment, Issei had an idea. Running towards the piece of the Cerberus, he would grab it and hold it to the gemstone of the shield. It would take a moment, but the piece would eventually disintegrate and disappear into the stone, before the shield itself would transform. Issei feeling the power beginning to rise, as he felt as though now he could turn the tide in the fight. Everyone watched on to see as Issei's shield would begin to change. It would become black and circular. However, even within the circle, 3 distinct shapes had taken form. There were 3 faces, one in the higher part of the shield, one in the lower left, and one in the lower right. There were 3 in all, a reflection of the Cerberus itself, the 3-headed monster, with the gemstone lying in the center. Issei would use the promotion system to promote himself to Queen, to gain the maximum amount of power that he could. The shield would give its name to Issei instinctively the moment he was able to activate it. This was a new shield, the Tri-Cerberus Shield, the shield of the 3 heads. The top head would release a mighty flame attack, pure hellfire itself. The second head, to the lowest right, would deliver a devastating ice attack, freezing anyone in place. And the third head, to the lower left, would serve as a head that could blast out strong slicing torrents of wind that could cut through almost any material on Earth. And as for the gemstone in the center would focus a highly concentrated beam of energy. With everyone working together, both Akeno and Rias would use their respective powers to stun the beast and hold it in place. Issei started with a great blast of fire, burning the beast alive, before using the ice to freeze it solid. Using the slicing winds, he would slice it into as many pieces as he could, before finally targeting the heart in the center of the beast. He would use the gemstone to unleash a devastating attack. Hopefully it would destroy it. However, even with everything that they had done, it had only seemed to damage it enough to slow it down. But the beast was slowly starting to regenerate and get back on its feet once more. Although thankfully, 2 more fires would arrive, and they would be able to quell and defeat the beast once and for all. This came in the form of both Kiba and Zenobia. Zenobia wielding the Sword of Destruction, and Kiba wielding his magic swords. They were able to defeat Cerberus, and now with the beast gone, they could turn their attention to Kokobile and Valper. However, the time that they had taken to defeat Cerberus, Valper had completed what he had set out to do. The fused Holy Sword was now created, and Kokobile would give Freed the instructions to use it, to destroy the riffraff. Freed licked his lips happily, thinking that now he would finally get the chance to carve out some real destruction. The sword had the combined techniques of 4 of the remaining Holy Swords. First was rapidly. This gave the sword user immense speed, speed on par with that of even Kiba himself, as a knight of the House of Grimmery. Next, it had the abilities of the sword Mimic, allowing the sword itself to be able to stretch and elongate, the blade being able to move freely like it had no form at all. There was the third sword, Nightmare, allowing for the wielder to create multiple duplicates of himself, mere mirages and illusions. However, they moved so quickly that you couldn't tell what was real and what was fake. And then finally, there was Transparency, allowing for the sword and its user to turn completely invisible. And for all of the horrible things that Freed was, no one could deny that when it came to fighting with the sword, he was definitely more than capable of holding his own, as the fused sword was able to even push back against the Sword of Destruction and against Kiba, the others feeling absolutely helpless against it. All the same, Kiba would still stand firm in his resolve to destroy the Holy Swords, to destroy everything that it had done to him. However, Valper would still mock him, telling him that in the end, the only reason for the Holy Sword project was because there were those who had what they called fragments, a special part of one's being that allowed them to wield a holy sword. These fragments came in all shapes and sizes. For those who were of a rare breed and form, there were those who were born with more than enough of the fragment that they could wield a holy sword, no problem. But there were others who had just too little of it, so much so that they couldn't really do much of anything. But you could extract the essence. You could take that fragment out, congeal it together, form it, condense it, and then once you had an item strong enough, you could just imbue the power into others. The only dark side for this process, however, is that in order to extract that fragment, that essence, it almost always resulted in the death of whoever it was taken from. For years, this was how it was done, how they were able to make the crystals needed in order to imbue those with the holy power, with the ability to wield holy swords, if they weren't strong enough to do it themselves, as even those beings were a rare breed. For Kiba, though, they weren't just mere sacrifices. They were his friends, children who all died believing in the cause that they were fighting for. They had been forsaken and left behind, and Valper now mocked their deaths. But in his mind, he had every right to. The very process that was deemed immoral, that was deemed evil, that caused him to be excommunicated, was the same process that produced the powerful sword wielders that they had in the world today. They took his research, everything, but left him behind. And for that, Valper no longer cared what happened to this world. Why did it matter to him? In the end, the church, everyone, they were all hypocrites. All of them were evil. It was just that good was only in the eye of the beholder, and in his mind. If that was really what they could do, to take his research and then throw him under the bus, when everything he did was at their whim and pleasure, then what reason did he have to stay to be loyal? His ethics, his code of conduct? He had given up on things like that a long time ago, as they were absolutely meaningless to a man like him. No, Valper had become a man who merely wanted to watch the world burn, and he was going to enjoy every second of it. All the while, as his final act of mockery, he would take the last soul stone, the stone that was used with the fragments of all of Kiba's comrades, the last one that was made before they had turned to other methods to get the essence that they needed, with no mortar required. He would throw it down at Kiba's feet, believing that, just like Kiba, it was absolutely useless at this moment in time. And for Kiba, his feelings felt all the same. This was the guilt that he had carried with him for all of these years. Why did he get to live? Why was he the one that escaped that fate? There were others, other children, other ones who had dreams, far bigger and grander than he ever did. And yet for whatever reason, his cursed fate was that he was the one that should survive. As his feelings began to pour from out of himself, so too did that of the souls within the stone. As the souls of his fallen comrades all surrounded him, they comforted him in his hour of need, reassuring him that everything would be fine, that in the end, Kiba living was not a mistake, but that rather their dreams and ambitions would now live on through him, through how he fought, that their power would guide and be with him all the way till the end. The others watched this display of beauty, a display of love and of hope, as it seemed as though their souls would combine with Kiba to become one. And in doing so, Kiba was able to unlock the balance breaker, his power now being able to peak, as he formed but one sword, a sword that was a combination of everything that he was, the devil power that now swelled within him, and the holiness of hope that came from the souls of his fallen comrades. The two powers that were polar opposites were now combining and joining into one to create the Holy Devil Sword, something that even in its own name was a very odd entity, something that simply could not exist, and yet it was a paradox of a weapon. All the same, Kiba and Zenobia would stand together. They had both come to the agreement that even for a holy sword, something like that, there was nothing holy within it. For its origins, its creation, it was pure evil. Zenobia would decide that now was the time to unleash her power as well, and she would summon Durandal, a holy sword on par with Excalibur, capable of cutting through almost anything. Together, the two sword users would work together as one, destroying the fused holy sword and defeating Freed once and for all. Vulpur watched all of his life's work being destroyed and smashed into pieces. It took him a while to understand, to figure things out. How could such a thing as the Holy Devil Sword even exist in this world? It shouldn't have been possible. However, the old man was smart, and he had figured out the reason why such a sword could exist now of all times. However, the moment that his brain figured it out though, Kokobile had a spear of light through his chest, causing him to cough on his own blood as he choked and died, as he didn't want the truth being revealed just yet. After all, there was still much more fun to be had in the meantime. He would rise from his throne as he would descend down upon them. He would stand in the center as they all surrounded him at once, and he merely ushered for them to come forth. Without hesitating, Rias and everyone else would engage with Kokobile in battle, everyone doing their best to try to defeat the fallen angel, but having little to no effect. Issei would use the slime shield to increase his overall durability, going in for as many quick strikes as he could, before being quickly swatted down. At the last moment, he would switch to using the holy shield itself, as the cross-like shield would form onto his arm. Kokubio would be surprised that he was able to use something like that, although from what he could sense, it seemed as though all of Issei wasn't entirely present. He would remark that he had sold it, or at least some of it. Some of his soul was now that of the Black Dragon, the cursed dragon of wrath. Now that Kokubio knew that he was in the presence of such fury, he was starting to get excited. But he wanted to drag that wrath out. He wanted to see just how much power Issei was packing. He could tell that Issei was fond of his female companions, and he took no expense in trying to draw out the anger within him, smacking away at Akeno and at Rias, and at Koneko also, taunting about what he had done to Irina before turning his attentions over to Asya. All the more, everyone would still continue to stand and fight, Zenobia more so than any of them. Kokubio felt as though now was the time to truly be diabolical. He would pretend to let his tongue slip, revealing some information that he shouldn't have. If this was a war, then he wasn't going to be holding back at anyone's expense. He would remark that Zenobia was foolish. Foolish to fight for a leader who was already dead. And Zenobia and the others demanded that he reveal what he meant by this. And with that, Kokubio would reveal the truth. That God had died in the last great war, along with the other 4 Devil Kings. This news was shocking to everyone. No one could quite understand how that was even possible. That for now, in the world that they lived in, God was dead. It was revealed that it was actually Michael who was keeping things running in heaven the way that they were. He was strong enough to be able to maintain the system, but it wasn't as powerful as it was before. That's how such anomalies as the Holy Devil Sword or the Holy Shield could even exist at a time like this. The rift, or the balance, between the 3 great powers was slowly shifting, changing, evolving into something even greater than themselves. But what did this mean for everyone else at large? Why was something like this hidden? The answer was obvious. What would happen to the angels in heaven if everyone found out that God had been killed? That their prayers went absolutely nowhere, or at the very least, to whom they went to was someone that was not the God that they knew. Their God was dead, and nothing destroyed faith, the building blocks of their power, more so than the diminishing and the lack of faith. Even for Zenobia, she could feel herself starting to be overwhelmed. She could feel the weight, the pressure, the anxiety, all beginning to form around her. If what indeed he said was true, and that God really was dead, then it was no wonder why people would be branded heretics and forced to leave. This information was almost too much to bear. But for Issei, this did not sway him one way or the other. As Kokubio continued to mock his friends, continued to attack and abuse them. No. In this moment, Issei had decided that he would give in to the rage. As deep within himself, he spoke to the Black Dragon. If not just for much, I only need a little power, just enough to destroy him. Kuroi would warn Issei, that to use such power, if he were to exceed his limits, it would only result in a pointless death. But Issei didn't care in that moment. Right now, there was only one person who could handle this wrath. All of this pain, all of this suffering, it manifested itself within Issei as his shield began to burn brightly, as the dark flame would form around it, the black armor forming on his arms and legs and on his chest. As Issei would raise his eyes towards Kokubio, Kokubio would smile. He could sense this power, this presence growing within Issei. It was more than what he could have expected. This was what he was truly waiting for. A true challenge. Someone worthy of giving him the fight that he felt he deserved. And Issei was more than intent on giving it to him. As even within the sky itself it began to open, Kokubio looked up to see what was descending upon them. It was the Iron Maiden itself. So, you dare to cast the Iron Maiden on me? How foolish do you think you are? Do you really have such audacity that you dare think that you could cast me? Before he could finish his sentence, the doors of the Iron Maiden would open as the bindings would begin to wrap around the fallen angel. As he descended, and the chains, that of which binded him, would begin to drag him within to the heart of the iron structure. Issei's aura would change to that of darkness. It took everything within his power to try to hold Kokubio in place. He knew that if he didn't put everything he had into this attack, then it was going to be the end of them. As the chains dragged Kokubio deep inside, he used his power to fight free of the Iron Maiden. However, Issei continued to hold his grip. As one hand held the shield of wrath, his other free hand was high in the air, his palm outstretched as his fingers slowly began to close in, forming a fist. The tighter that the fist was becoming, the closer Kokubio was to being trapped inside of the Iron Maiden, as he enchanted the curse. Kokubio, your greed and your lust for war will not go unpunished. You have been judged and found guilty. Instinct conquers all, instilling new agony, yet bliss transcends pain. Within this virgin cold ore, who shall swallow even your screams within her embrace, suffer in anguish as your entire body is stabbed and skewered. Now, seek your judgment within the Iron Maiden. Close. Issei would close his fist, and Kokubio would find himself dragged within the Iron Maiden. As the doors were shut, the spikes now protruding through his body, he would yell out in pain and in agony, as one by one, the other spikes and skewers would stab within the Iron Maiden itself. His screams would begin to echo and holler all throughout the battlefield. It sounded like something that was purely out of hell. The others that were watching on, they couldn't feel Issei's presence in that moment, as a sadistic grin would come across his face. It was as if he was enjoying it somehow. As Issei closed his fist entirely, the head of the Iron Maiden, the final skewer, would be dragged down. And as it did so, it seemed as though they had won. At least that's what they believed. But that couldn't have been possible. At least, they didn't think that Issei had that much power within him. Even Issei within himself, he didn't think he was capable of that kind of destruction. But something didn't quite feel right. All the same, the Iron Maiden didn't disappear. It wasn't over. The doors would begin to rattle and shake, before finally they would burst open, and from out of it, Kokobile would emerge, bloody and skewered. His wings had holes within them from where he had been punctured. He looked as though he had been stabbed over 100 times. There was even one stab wound in the center of his skull. He looked as though he were on the verge of death, as his body slowly began to regenerate and heal itself. Issei would collapse to the ground on one knee, as the power was starting to become overwhelming. Issei knew that this wasn't enough, he needed more. Could he use the blood sacrifice? Would that be enough? Did he even have enough strength to pull that off? Rias and the others would come to his side at once, as Kokobile would look down upon them, angered that he had to exert that much energy just to survive. If it had been anyone else in that situation, besides maybe he and Azazel, they more than likely would have been killed. You brat. You really think that that's enough to kill me? Who do you think you're fooling? I survived war with God. It'll take more than that to defeat me. But I must admit, you're definitely making this interesting. Interesting? Please. If you find him interesting, then you're even worse than I thought, Kokobile. Everyone turned to look around and to hear where that voice was coming from. The outer barrier itself had been completely decimated. Standing among them, shining in the night sky, his armor reflecting of the moon itself, bright white, with shades of dark blue. The white armored being, whose wings seemed as though they were made from the stars themselves, hovered above Kokobile. You... Azazel has sent you? Yes. I am here to clean up the mess that you have made. You have brought shame to our master, and this cannot go unpunished. The white-armored being would effortlessly destroy Kokobile, with even more ease than even he was expecting. He knew that he was more than capable of defeating him, but he had no idea that Issei of all people could have done that much damage. If he truly trained and learned how to control that power, he could definitely become a force to be reckoned with. But that was to be expected. After all, he was a dragon like him. All the same, Kokobile was defeated and left, heaving in a pile of his own blood and broken bones. As the white dragon picked him up on his shoulders, preparing to leave with the others who had been causing trouble, they would be stopped as Issei would slowly rise to his feet once more and asked, "Are you he? Are you the white one?" Indeed I am, boy. I am the one known as Albion. Ah, Albion. 'Tis good to see that you have survived all this time. Croy, the black dragon, you now live as well, but of course, it is our nature. And have you heard from the Red One? No. No one has heard from the Red One in over 1,000 years. I see. While he is my rival, you are still an adversary as well. As are you, White One. I have not forgotten. As long as we live in this world, we will always be destined to fight. Issei, however, would try to speak to the one whom was inside of the armor and not the dragon, to learn of who he truly was. However, the voice from within the armor would merely tell Issei to learn to control that power and to get stronger. And that in the end, they would meet once more someday. And with that, the white dragon would fly into the night. With the battle now over, and the day now saved, everyone took a moment to relax and to calm down. They had no idea that the White Dragon Emperor of all people would appear, and that he would have saved their skins if the way that he had. Even with Kokobile taking much damage from Issei, they knew fully well that they hadn't escaped. Things couldn't have gotten much worse. As Asuya went to help Issei heal, as the armor dissipated from his body, Kiba would walk over to him and thank him, and he would apologize to everyone for what he had done. But before he could say any more, the group would simply pull him into a hug, happy that he was back home where he belonged. Following the events of the Kokobile situation, many relationships and dynamics were changed in ways that no one truly could foresee. Zenobia, now having learned the truth of what had happened to God, was branded a heretic and was removed from the church. Of course, this didn't truly bother her the way that she thought it would, although now she felt as though everything that she thought she knew was a complete and total lie. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. She didn't have a place to go, so she turned to Rias and asked if she could be accepted, and Rias welcomed her. As the user of Durandal, she would be a great addition as the second knight to the House of Grimmery. Zenobia would also apologize to Asuya for her rude behavior and how she had spoken, now feeling as though she now understood where Asuya was coming from. But Asuya assured her that everything was fine, even if she was a devil. She was happy with the life she had now, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. And she was more than happy to be friends with anyone, including Zenobia. And this made her happy as well. As for Issei, he felt as though things were finally starting to look up, even though he had to take some time to recover, as using the cursed power tended to have that effect on him. At the same time though, he did get nice attention from a few lovely ladies, Akano especially, as the more time passed, the more she found herself falling for him, and to the point where she couldn't deny that she too was a girl in love. All the same, Issei just hoped that things might get back to normal soon. And on one night, it seemed to be that way. While the others were out enjoying their evening, Issei had gotten a call from the client he had been with for a while now. The old rich guy who usually wanted to just hang out and do different chill stuff. With no worries, Issei would arrive to his client's home, and they played video games for a while, since Issei had shown them some of the new and latest gaming consoles before he left, and now it seemed like this guy collected all of them, and he had gotten pretty good at it. As he finished up, Issei would walk over to his bookshelf, As he looked through them, there was one book in particular that caught his eye. If he didn't know any better, the symbol on the side of the book, it matched his shield. As he grabbed the book slowly, he would start to flip through the pages. It was a book that had crafting, things for healing potions, medicines, various items, even a few spells. But why would he have something like, you like that book, kid? I figured you would. After all, you and that shield is pretty enamored by it. How do you know about the shield? You never told me. No. But I have eyes and ears out there, kid, so I have a way of figuring these things out. Issei would stand on guard, dropping the book to the ground as he readied his shield. And just who the hell are you? How do you know about me? Because, kid. A sinister grin would come across his face as 10 black wings would form on each side of him. I am Azazel, leader of the fallen angels. Nice to meet you, Issei Hyodo. Or should I say, Black Dragon Emperor. This concludes What If Issei Was a Shield Hero? High School DxD, Dragon's Rage, Season 2, Part 2. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we're going to be continuing What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange, Naruto Mystic Adventures, Part 5. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.